7 سنين من المالح. إذا بتعطيني دواء رايح أضوي غرفتي.
ليش؟
عشان أقرأ.
لما نكبر شوي ونصير نطلع عالتلة ونلقط زهور كتير من حقل جارتنا غدير.
We all share common desires. The desires to feel safe and secure in the places where we live, the desire to learn more about ourselves and the world around us, and the desire to connect with one another, with those in our communities, around the world, and especially the generations that have gone before us. This is human nature, and this is the birthright of every person on this planet.
اسمي نيفين، عمري 11. أنا لو معي ضوء في عنا حوش صغير بضله دايما طافي، وفي مرة نزلت عن الدرجات خبطت عبسها سودا والدنيا عتمة، زحلقت وهي حامل، ودوها على المستشفى. بعدين أنا رحت اشتريت له وجبته وركبته عشان ما حد يتزحلق ولا تنكسر ايده ولا إشرة ولا إشي يصير فيه. يلا بخير وسلام.
لما نكبر شوي ونصير نطلع عالتلة ونلقط زهور كتير من حقل جارتنا غدير. لما نكبر شوي ونصير نطلع عالتلة ونلقط زهور كتير من حقل جارتنا غدير.
By illuminating the path we have come from, we recognize our roots and acknowledge our inspiration, and we can then light up our path forward. So where do you choose to shine the light given the chance? When the light is passed to you, what do you want to illuminate?
أنا اسمي ريبال وعمري 9 سنين، وتيتا الله يرحمها هسه هي بالقبر. أعطوني ضوء عشان أضوي غرفة تيتا جميعا. وحكينا لهم عن قصة الشيخ طامح، وستي حكت لي القصة بأكملها.
قمر أبو ليلة شد عشرة الليلة، خبز وجبني مالحة من عند عمتي صالحة. قمر أبو ليلة شد عشرة الليلة.
هذا بيجي عليكم تفتحوا لي الباب يا ولادي، تشجعوا بناتي وتفتحوا لي.
قمر أبو ليلة شد عشرة الليلة، خبز وجبني وخيارة من عند ست الختيارة. قمر يا عيوني وقمر ابو ليلي شو تعشيت الليل
ضايل الاثنين.
I think the internet is a bit slow here. I'm sorry to say.
That's okay. We got the spirit, and I just want to welcome everyone. The good morning, good afternoon, and in Ramallah, good evening. My name is Gail Doring, and I am a member of the board for Pilgrims of Ibrahim, and it's my pleasure and delight to welcome you. As we were watching and just considering the mission and the foundations of Seraj Library Project, I was thinking that culturally and across the world, we are connected by stories. And sadly, in the unevenness of our cultures and the economics and freedoms of such, some of us are able to forget some stories easier than others. And so before we begin, or I say anything, or we do all those little housekeeping issues, I would like us just to take a few moments of silence to remember Shireen Abu Akleh and her really, really tragic murder as a journalist, as a Palestinian, as an American citizen, and as someone who cared deeply and shared stories all the time. And so, and important ones. And to remember her life, to remember those around her, and to remember now what emanates from that terrible, terrible tragedy. So let us take a moment of silence. Amen. And just as we were coming on, Laurie also reminded us that we live in this tension of grief and joy, and it's especially poignant in Palestine. So we get the joy, the pure joy of hearing about Seraj Library Project today, and to have a group of folks to talk about that. Before I introduce them, I just want to remind you that we are on a webinar format. You will be invited throughout. Anytime you have a question throughout the presentation, you could put it in the Q&A. I believe everyone is muted already, so you don't have to worry about muting yourself. And also just a note that this is being recorded. And so if you know folks who afterwards you would like to share this with, or you think they would have wanted to participate but could not, please share the YouTube. It will be on our YouTube, the Pilgrims of Ibrahim YouTube, I believe, and maybe also Seraj, you have a YouTube channel as well. So let me not take any further, just to welcome people. I want to welcome a number of our Pilgrims of Ibrahim board members are here. And a number of years ago, we started Peace Partners, and really expanding our connection to folks in Palestine and in Israel that are working in unique ways for peace and justice. And so, and just excuse me. First, I want to introduce to you Laurie, and I know it's Salami. And Laurie is a co-founder of Seraj Library, and they founded it in 2005. You'll hear a lot more about that, but she says with several friends, including Pauline Kaufman, and she's the executive director, and her husband, Estephan, who will join us a little bit later, is an advisor to the Prime Minister. Pauline Kaufman is a founding board member. She lives in Oak Park, Illinois, which is adjacent to and west of Chicago, and met Laurie and Estephan when they were earning master's degrees in nonprofit work at North Park University. And then Galen Burghardt is our strong silent type who is the chair of the board of Seraj and formerly the director of development and helping with developing and expanding a fund base for this important project. Just a note that there are former board, Kathy Matsushima was a former board member and was very involved in Seraj, as well as our former executive director, Laurie Leiter-Bright. And currently the liaison from the Pilgrims of Eveline board is Haifa Batista. And then I just wanna, again, throw out a welcome to all of you and thank you. And I believe also one of our other former executive directors, Don Griggs, is on the webinar as well. And so we thank you and we love that, you know, we have friends and that they remain friends, not just in terms of active service, but in terms of a long tenured friendship. And I think you'll hear more about that. Certainly Pauline, Galen just said, Pauline knows everybody. So Laurie, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And if you all need something, shout out, but I will stay silent until we close at the end, and I will give you encouragements. Also, if there are links and things that are brought up, those will show up in the chat. Esrea, I failed to introduce Esrea, who's our other panelist and who is our current executive director of Pilgrims of Eveline. And if something gets referenced, and certainly at a minimum, the websites for Seraj and for Pilgrims of Eveline, but if other references come up, she'll put those in the chat. But once again, your vehicle is the Q&A. And Esrea, as always, thank you so much for your support and promotion, as well as for backing up the technology today. Thank you. Laurie.
Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you for everyone who took the time out to come and hear about Seraj. I have to tell you, we're so thankful to Pilgrims of Eveline. I think you've been supporters of Seraj for, is it possible, maybe 10 years when the idea was in its very beginning phases. You were one of the early supporters. And personally, for me, Abuna Shakur's book was the first book I read when I came to the Palestine issue, when I came to learn about peace and justice. His was the first book I picked up, and I think I'm really lucky that that was the right choice. So thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you about Seraj. I think I'll start and give you just a quick history, and Pauline has been with us since the very first days, so I'm going to have her jump in. And my husband is the co-founder with me. He's on his way, so he wanted to join as well. I like to say that Seraj started as a love story, because it did. And if you could imagine for a moment a little girl living in the suburbs, not quite fitting in with her classmates and finding refuge and the ability to dream in her school library, hanging out with the librarian. And on the other side of the world, a young man, not quite fitting in, maybe in his village school, coming across a cache of books that had been thrown into the garbage, like Reveille for Radicals and Abraham Lincoln's biography, and discovering in these books there was a whole world outside of what he knew that he really wanted to discover. So not many years later, these two found each other in graduate school. And where do you think they fell in love? At the library. So we spent lots of time at the library. And Estephan is here, so I'm gonna introduce him in a minute. Are you coming to see? We started.
Hi, everyone.
So we finished school and we got married, and we knew we were going to come live in Palestine and wanted to bring some kind of project back with us. So during those early days, we would spend hours and hours walking the streets of Chicago, thinking about what kind of project could we do that would transform the communities here. And during that time, North Park, Pauline will remember, we hosted a group of young leaders from Palestine and took them to the Elmhurst Public Library outside of Chicago. And two of the girls started crying after their experience in the library, saying, just wish we have a space like this for us in Palestine. And that was it. We already loved the libraries. We knew that was the right project. And so with that dream, with that passion in mind, we gathered our friends, and luckily we had very intellectual, passionate, very talented friends like Pauline, who was a professor at the university and founded Seraj Library Project in Chicago. We raised a very small amount of money in the first round to bring back to Palestine and went to Estephan's village of Jifna, a small village. And we were so excited to give them a library. We thought this is exactly what everybody wants and what everybody needs. And we went around the village, we're bringing you a library. And what did we hear from people? People don't read. Why would you want to do a library? People don't read. But the women's group came to us and said, you know, adults don't read, but it's not too late for the kids. What if we do a children's library? What if you give us that? And so that's what we did. I don't know if you want to jump in. Okay. We established the children's library and it was really successful. It was in a very small room in the women's group. The women's group took the responsibility of running the activities. And the young man was visiting from Deir al-Mar refugee camp one day. And he said, wow, I mean, I would love to see this in my camp for my kids, my family. Is it possible? And we thought, yes, it is possible. We went back to the board in the US and said, can we do this again? And raised another set of funds to open the second library in Deir al-Mar refugee camp. And then not so long later, someone from a neighboring village was visiting and said, wow, we would really love this in our village. And so it rolled from there to the point where we had established 10 libraries in rural villages and refugee camps. During the years, we found, we had established it, but we gave it to the community. It was their responsibility to run activities and programs. And depending on who our partner was, they had varying levels of activity, let's say. And sometimes it was just one person who was so passionate about the project, but when they were no longer around, for example, the woman who was running the project, the library project in Jifna had passed away, nobody else took up that project. And so we worked with our board in the US and thought, what can we do to activate the spaces better? And so we hired a young woman named Fida Ataya. She's still working with us today. This was, I think, we realized 10 years ago, to implement one cultural or reading activity a month in each of the 10 locations. And so that was great. And people were using the space and they were being inspired with these activities, but it wasn't quite enough. And so with the board in the US, we came up with the idea of a scholarship program to give scholarships to university students in these communities who would also volunteer their time in the libraries. So that was also another boost in keeping the libraries active. Then we realized, we love to be partners, we love to support, but we have learned so many lessons and we have a lot that we want to implement ourselves, creating curriculums and go deeper in the activities, which led us to deciding to establish 2 centers of our own. Do you want to talk or you're?
Oh, keep
okay, I don't know.
I'm enjoying this story.
I know Pauline was there at the beginning and she's been there since the beginning, I should say. She's been a big supporter throughout. So Pauline, please, if you want to jump in on the history before I get to where we are today, maybe
Sure.
now's a good time.
Thank you for that, Laurie. You've been talking about what's been happening in Palestine. In order to raise all that money, we needed to gather our supporters in the US, and we're very grateful to the Pilgrims of Ebeling for helping us early on. We started in the basement of the Elmhurst Library when Jim Wall, the former editor of the Christian Century, who sadly died last year, was the moderator. Well, he called together my husband, myself, Kathy Matsushima, and Aki, and some others from the Middle East Task Force of Chicago Presbytery to get this project started. And we were very hard pressed to raise the amount of money that we needed. In the early days, we thought $6,000 per library was enough. Ha! That soon grew. And because they needed more books, bookcases, chairs, better quality furniture that would survive children using them, and also computers, a projector, a place to show films, and internet connections. I mean, you name it, libraries do have costs associated with them. So we were very grateful in 2006 when some others like Cotton Fight, an Anglican psychotherapist and a priest, became our moderator, and John Castle took over the treasurer's role. They helped us expand the board immensely, including an interdenominational, interfaith base. So we now have Jewish Voice for Peace members on the board, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Methodists, you name it. But it's a faith-based organization, I think. You know how that goes. People who have been working on advocacy for justice in Israel, Palestine for years came to Seraj because we're so excited about something we can do that's positive for children in the villages. I remember that early fundraiser in a private home when it came time, we'd given our pitch and then it was time to ask people to donate. So I made a remark about beating the bushes. It was time to beat the bushes. I'll never forget the look Estephan gave me. He's beat the bushes? And I had to explain that that means ask people for money. And they did respond. But still, we needed a much broader base. And so now we've had annual fundraisers, and we have a United States board, the US board, that raises the money. Estephan and Laurie have established a Palestinian board. They make the decisions about where the library will be located, how they relate to the village or larger community, what kind of furnishings they need. They make all those decisions. We raise the money and send it when they tell us they need it. So that's how it got started. And okay, back to you, Laurie, to pick up where I left off.
Time is strange and it flies. I feel like that fundraiser in Peg Griffith's house was yesterday, but I think it was maybe 15, 16 years ago.
Yep.
So let me pick up with where we are now. We have this amazing board here that's been really supportive, and they really understand the importance of what we want to do. We decided to establish libraries that we ourselves would oversee with our own staff at Seraj, which was not something we had done in our history before. And the opportunity came up to be a part of a cultural hub in the city of Kufr Aqab. Rawak, which is an architectural preservation organization, uncovered under the ground the old city of Kufr Aqab, which is about 150 years old. The houses had been buried under dirt and streets, and they uncovered the homes and rehabilitated them to an extent, and had a vision to establish a cultural hub where different cultural organizations would be in this little old city working together to revitalize the village and the broader city around it. I'm going to ask Estephan to explain Kufr Aqab to you if you haven't heard of it. It's very high crime and low quality of life. It's just outside of Jerusalem, and it really needs attention, and it needs safe and beautiful spaces. But the city, it's an important history. I'll have Estephan explain why this is important.
Well, Kufr Aqab originally is a small village. It's like 2,000 people. But because of its location, it's between Ramallah and Jerusalem. And it is considered, or a part of it, considered part of Jerusalem, according to the Israeli definition of the borders of Jerusalem. So those Palestinians who marry from the West Bank, like if the husband is Jerusalem ID, and the wife is a West Bank ID holders, or vice versa, they need to look for a place where they could both stay, so the husband or the wife could maintain their Jerusalem ID and the other one could live together. So one of those areas happened to be Kufr Aqab, because it is outside the wall of Jerusalem, but it's part of the Jerusalem municipality. So as a result, this area grew to become almost 130,000 people live there.
Within 10 years.
Within like 10, 15 years. Imagine a small village like 2,000, and now it's 130,000. Unfortunately, it has become like just a big refugee camp. I mean, it has buildings, high rises, but it is really not suitable for living, to be honest. But people find themselves that they have to live there again to maintain their Jerusalem ID status, but they can also live with their spouse who could be from a West Bank resident. So the library and the center there, which Laurie will tell you about it, would serve this entire population.
So we were given 2 houses that I think it was one of the former, what's the word? The head of the village, Mufti? Mukhtar. We learned later that he had 2 wives, and he was wise enough to build 2 houses that were next to each other. So they didn't live in the same house. So in one of the houses, we have the children's library upstairs and a cafe downstairs. And then the other is our national storytelling center that we're creating with a Seraj office. We had a beloved former board chair who suddenly passed away, Reverend Cotton Fight. And as we were all mourning his loss, the board in the US said, we would like to do something to honor him. And I remember those conversations. Galen and Pauline were there, and the storytelling center made sense because Cotton would come here on what he called listening tours. He would just sit with people and hear their story and return to Chicago and talk about what he learned. And inspired by that, we want to do something similar. We have been doing something similar in our programs for more than a decade, but now we have our own center where we can create a curriculum and how you collect your community stories, how you can share the stories. Part of what we do is bring these stories to life through inspiring and encouraging artists to do something. We just created our first film that debuted at the Chicago Film Festival this week that tells the story of the first Palestinian accordion player. We've asked artists to take local stories from their communities and produce a piece of art and then have an art show and show it in the community. So these stories should not only be archived and documented and collected, they really need to be brought to life and part of the stories that we tell on a daily basis. So that's the Storytelling Center and the library. I cannot tell you how different this location is for us, having worked in villages and refugee camps, but how much they need this space. Even as we're in the final days, we have our grand opening on June 8th. We're in our final days of finishing the space, and we have teenage boys stopping by, and they come in groups, and they're like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And our policy at Seraj is ahla wa sahla, you are welcome. You want to know what we're doing here? Come inside and let's tell you. And immediately this tough exterior breaks down, and they're like, "Wow, this is really cool. My sister would like to come here. Can I bring my sister? Can I bring my mom?" And so I think that what we're doing there is really important, and it's going to be tough, but it's going to be amazing. So simultaneously, in the village, it's not a village anymore, I guess it's a city of Birzeit. I'm sure many of you have heard of it because of Birzeit University. The municipality contacted us to see if we'd be interested in creating a library or cultural center in their old city. So they have, if you imagine the old city of Jerusalem, they have something like this, but on a much smaller scale. And they have given us a courtyard, which is 6 rooms with a courtyard in the middle. It's also probably 150 years old. And we are establishing 3 libraries and a music and art cultural center in Birzeit. I'll have Estephan tell you a little bit about Birzeit before I continue.
Birzeit is a municipality. It's like a medium size in our standards. I think it's like small in the American standard, of course. It's around 7,000 inhabitants. So it is known for its culture and education because of Birzeit University and because of the people who also live there. It is also a mixed village, mixed like there are Christians and Muslims in there. The mayor is Christian, for example, but it's people are living together very well. And there are normally a lot of cultural activities in there. And it has a very beautiful old city. It's old city from 200-300 years old, and that's where Seraj New Center will be located. And it's a lot. It's really, really, really beautiful. We were there yesterday or the day before, almost about to be finished in preparation for the grand opening. But Laurie could tell you about what the vision of that center would be.
Actually, I think that I'll share a video with you. The video was created about a year ago, so the spaces have come much further along. By chance, we have the grand openings of both locations next month. But we're creating safe and beautiful spaces and something different that you don't find somewhere else in Palestine. For example, in one of the rooms in Birzeit, we're having an artist create a tree and a sky. And so when the children walk in, it should just take them somewhere else. So I'm going to share my screen and show you a 5-minute video, and then we'll come back and talk a bit and take questions. To exit this one. Oh. Do I get up? Okay, there we go. Sorry for that. Welcome to Seraj Library Project's House of Stories in the beautiful and tumultuous village of Kufr Aqab. The house we are standing in today is nearly 150 years old and was completely covered in dirt and rubble, with streets paved on either side. A well-respected NGO here in Palestine, Rawak Center for Architectural Preservation, had the idea to uncover the old homes of this village and create a cultural hub to bring to life the heart of this village of Kufr Aqab. Kufr Aqab is located just next to and north of Jerusalem, but the original residents of this village of 1,500 people are forbidden from entering the holy city. In the last decade, as a direct result of Israeli policies to keep Palestinians from Jerusalem out of the city, this sleepy little village has ballooned to over 100,000 inhabitants. Schools and housing are overcrowded, crime is high, and quality of life is low. We are honored to have been asked to house our storytelling center here in this cultural hub, along with Seraj's public library and cafe. In addition to offering many lively and meaningful library activities, as we do in all of our locations, we will be developing a storytelling training curriculum to provide higher-level training to professional storytellers and to teach members of our communities in how to share their personal and family narratives. Our next phase is working with Rawak and local carpenters to furnish the inside. We hope to make it operational and ready to welcome the community by the start of the new school year. This couldn't have been achieved without so many of us working together in both the United States and Palestine. We continue to be humbled by the support of all our friends in the US, and we continue to strengthen our work here through partnerships with like-minded organizations. Our collective efforts will hopefully bring something beautiful and essential to Palestine. Birzeit is a well-known village 20 miles north of Jerusalem and is home to around 6,000 people, half of whom are Christian and half of whom are Muslim. It's a special village with its own unique vibe, due in large part to the fact it is home to the largest, most prestigious Palestinian university, Birzeit University. The village is a bustling place, full of vegetable and falafel shops, bakeries, specialty craftsman shops, and both churches and mosques. In the heart of the village is a beautiful old city, more than 150 years old. Birzeit has long been known as a home to artists, musicians, writers, and intellectuals, but there is no public space for people who share an interest in culture to meet. The municipality reached out to Seraj to renovate and establish a library and cultural center in the heart of the old city, with the hope of bringing reading and art and music and cultural activities back to the village. This is Hosh al-Atem, which is a courtyard surrounded by 6 rooms. Hosh al-Atem in Arabic means the courtyard of darkness, and as many of you know, Seraj means the light, so we think it is a serendipitous connection, as Seraj's cultural activities will light up the village. The first room here will house the library, which is desperately needed as there is no public library in Birzeit, and the university library is only open to students until 4 p.m. Just next to the library will be the cafe, so people can meet and talk and share ideas and dream while overlooking beautiful Birzeit. The third room will house offices and meeting rooms for Seraj. The fourth room will be the art room, for people to experience all kinds of art and even get messy if the mood calls for it. The fifth room will be the music room, which will also house the Palestinian Music Library, in which we plan to collect all the works of music by Palestinians and Palestinian organizations, both here and abroad, to preserve, share, and promote Palestinian music and musicians. The final room will house a specialty library for small children and will also be the storytelling and drama room. Storytelling, creativity, culture, these things are part of what defines the human experience, but sadly is something that isn't accessible to many Palestinians. Bringing these opportunities to communities here was our dream, and the dream of so many others for many, many years. We're so excited to be able to embark on this new adventure, and we're looking forward to growing this with all of you. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to watch that, but I have to say, after rewatching that, you will be amazed at the transformation of the spaces. Oh, sorry, I think I have something playing. How do you get it to stop?
What is that?
Okay, I'm sorry for that.
Are they still there? Or did we look out?
Oh, where'd they go? Oh my God.
Laurie, I think the video is such a tempting, wonderful introduction to both spaces. I'm glad you were able to show that, and I'm eager to see what it looks like when it's finished. The fact that you're opening both in June makes me want to come over and visit. And I know Seraj has a trip planned in the fall, as does Pilgrims. So there will be visitors coming.
We really can't wait to share the spaces with you. There's much further along than that video indicates, but I'm happy that we have that because it'll show the progress of how we were able to transform the space. And they're even more exciting when you see people inside. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, but
Please
sorry, I mean, these two spaces are really so beautiful now. I mean, once you see how it has become, I think you will not even recognize it. So it's really nice surprise for you when you come and see it. I just want to say a few words about what makes Seraj unique in that sense. First, we have been really fortunate with good people on the board. As you see now, I mean, two of them are here. We always had wonderful people on the board who are really dedicated and working so hard for Seraj here, especially in the US, but also in Palestine. Two, Seraj has been really working with partners. And Pilgrims of Abilene is, of course, is an old partner and friends, and we have been really working in partnership together. Seraj has a lot of partners here and also in the US, and that is also unique about the way Seraj is operating. Three is the focus. Seraj doesn't do so many different things. Seraj is specialized in an area that when we started, we felt there is a great need, and that need continues to evolve. This is why the library is the anchor of everything we're doing, but then also all of the other activities surrounding the library, like arts, music, storytelling. But the library remains the foundation and the anchor, and that is also unique, because usually a lot of organizations, especially in Palestine, they follow funding, and as a result, they end up doing so many different things. So they lose the focus. With Seraj, we've been really fortunate to maintain the focus of our mission and work. And then Seraj has usually a long-term commitment to the communities. Some of our communities that we started with, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we still committed. We're still in touch, we provide them with support, they're engaged in activities and so forth. And that is also unique in a way. We don't just go and open something and then leave, and then we never meet them again. So this is also that long-term commitment is also very important and unique. To be honest, I don't know whether Laurie and I, either one of us, has imagined where Seraj would be when we started 16 or 17 years ago. Seraj really has gone a long way, continues to grow. It's strong mission. The people are also very dedicated here and in the US. And sometimes I feel that we just gotten started. We just got started. And it's really continues to be a young organization, although we have been around for over 17 years. So that's all because of friends like you are, and of course, our wonderful board members and friends in the US. Is that?
I think Pauline wants to say something, and then
And I want to mention that we have had good friends, basically from the Middle East Task Force and from the Presbyterian Church background. Bruce Rigdon, for instance, was a moderator of Pilgrims, and he's one of the founders of the Middle East Task Force and well known to all of us. I think you also know Ted Settle. Ted and Jane have volunteered at the school in Abilene in the spring semester for several years, and they're now have moved to retirement home, but they're good friends from the Israel-Palestine Mission Network of the Presbyterian Church. And of course, we've also already mentioned Kathy and Aki Matsushima, who are also from are well-known Presbyterians. So I think I should give equal standing to the other denominations and interfaith groups that are helping to raise the money, but we're grateful for that connection with Pilgrims.
I think I just want to end it here, and then we're so happy to have conversations with people. Gail started the webinar today with a moment of silence for Shireen, and I just would like to just end saying something about her. You know, when after her murder, people flocked to her office, which is in downtown Ramallah, and people were crying, and a woman yelled out, "Where are her people? Where are her people? Where are her people?"
Family, yeah.
And then another woman said, "She has no family. She's not married, and her parents are dead. She has no one." And an older woman in the back said, "We are her people, we are her family." And so the whole country is mourning. Everyone feels they've lost not only the one voice that was in their home every day telling the truth about who they are to the world, but they lost a sister, they lost a friend, they lost a daughter. And with all this mourning on top of mourning, Palestinians don't have a chance to recover. It's grief on top of grief. And we have joyful celebrations in between, but there's no time to catch your breath to process the trauma. And Galen actually said something a few board meetings ago that I loved, and I want to take it and use it. You know, Seraj means the light, the lantern, and what we do is shine the light in dark places. So when we say that our work is important, this is not something we say lightly. It's simple work, it's meaningful work, and it's life-giving work. And I think you at Pilgrims of Ibilene are doing similar work, and I don't know how to say it except that it's life-giving, and it's so incredibly important for people here. And I admire you all so much for your commitment to truth and to justice and to bringing dignity and humanity to people that so deserve it. So thank you for that, and thank you for letting us share about our work.
Thank you to all of you. And I want to add a punctuation to Pauline's comment, but also thinking about how, you know, surely you can go to either Seraj's website and or the Pilgrim's website, and there will be places for you to donate. And of course, donations and financial contributions are so important to keep these projects going. But also we are reminded over and over and over again that presence and solidarity and building collaboration and companionship is so deeply important and needed. And so the opportunities for both of these experiences in the fall, the Living Stones pilgrimage, as well as the exploration through Seraj to be there. And finally, after feels like forever, 2 years, that visitors are starting to come. And I think to be constructive and to be moral tourists, not just and pilgrims, to set a model, but also to be there, to cry with, to rejoice with, to do all those things is really important. So and it leads to one of the questions that was asked, and I just want to say, if any of you have any last questions, please put those in the Q&A. But Margaret asked if any of our board members have visited any of the libraries, and I know we are going to be there in the fall, and I cannot remember if it's on the itinerary of the pilgrimage or not, but I'm going early, and that's one of my, it's on my list, is to somehow arrange a way to get to, I hope, the center in the fall. So, but I don't know, there are a lot of board members on, and if any of you have done so, or Esra, do you know of folks formally, or you
Yes.
all?
So I'd like to say yes. The visit to the Seraj Library is on day one of the Living Stones pilgrimage that is coming up September 29th through October 11th. And also, pretty much I can say on previous Living Stones pilgrimages, there's always a visit at a Seraj Center library location, and many of our board members became board members following their participation on a Living Stones pilgrimage. So I can comfortably say that yes, many of our board members have visited Seraj Libraries.
I'd like to jump in and just say that we appreciate that. One of our educational events that Seraj did for our donors was to invite a member of the board from Palestine, Salwa Duwaibas, to speak and tell us about herself. She is with Military Court Watch, which, as you know, I'm sure, deals with Palestinian children who are put in prisons and need somebody to help them. It's a very depressing kind of work that brings you into just the awful side of life in Palestine these days. She ended her talk by saying she loves serving on the Seraj board because the libraries are a place to get away from the stress of everyday life and enjoy books and enjoy cultural events. And it gave me another appreciation for the work we're doing. I just wanted to mention that and lift it up.
Thank you. Our Q&A is quiet. I have a question for both Estephan and Laurie. I wonder, I'm sure you have hundreds of stories, but do you have a story of something that was is particularly memorable or transformative about one of your story projects, or just something that would have particular meaning for us to carry through the day as we close out our time together?
That's such a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think one that always sticks in our hearts is the library and the Aida refugee camp. And I think that's the one that most of your board members have visited. As you probably know, the population there is one of the most tear gassed populations in the world. And for a few years, the incursions, it was just every Friday they would come to the camp and gas the whole camp. And the people started sending their kids to the library on Fridays. They would put the shutters down and they would do storytelling, they would read books together, and the kids couldn't see outside, they couldn't hear, and they were protected from the gas. So our spaces are safe and beautiful, both emotionally and actually physically protecting children from the violence outside.
I'd like to just mention that I visited with Laurie and with Fidat Ataya, the program staff person for Seraj. We went to the library in the Jordan River Valley at Jiftlik, which is a small library. It's on a plot of land that's really a military area, and nobody's supposed to be there. So you can't advertise the library, but Palestinians know it's there, and it seemed like hundreds of children were running around. It was spring, so the grass was tall and green, which it's the Jordan River Valley, one of the most fertile areas in Palestine, but it has been claimed as a military area. But that was a day I'll never forget, to how appreciative those kids are to have that library to go and check out books.
And Asraya has a question as well.
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. One question is, I'm curious if you at Seraj, do you also cover the salaries of the staff who staff the centers and libraries, or how? And do you also have to cover paying rent and for the spaces? And then another question that I have is, what are some of the challenges that you encounter when you're, establishing a new library in a new community, or what kinds of challenges have come your way?
Well, the first 10 libraries, Estephan and I, we were just doing this as volunteers for more than a decade. And so we would go into the community and we established the library, and we would do one activity a month, but we didn't put anyone from the villages on staff. So for us, we have staff now that will be in the new centers and are implementing our programs, but this is new for us. So for more than a decade, it was powered by volunteers, which we're so proud of that. But then we grew too much. We had to have staff. Regarding the challenges, Estephan might for sure have a different one, but for me, it's the books. Books are extremely difficult to get here. Books are expensive, they are taxed heavily when you bring them across the border, and if they are not brought in Hebrew as well as Arabic, they're also fined. And I can send afterwards the New York Times article that actually talks about that. So Palestine is different than anywhere else, even in the Middle East. We're not able to get some of the great publishers. Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, they have great publishing houses, children's books, almost impossible to get them here. So we're constantly bringing them in suitcases across the border, and sometimes they're not allowed in. This is something now that a lot of the more book organizations are talking about. I'm not sure that there's anything we can do to actually change that, but it's a big problem.
It's the same one. I was going
the
to
books.
also
It's the
mention the
biggest
same
problem.
thing about books. Yeah.
I would like to just mention that I think all of the money that covers the salaries, the rental of space, we have a bookkeeper, a financial expert that deals with the record keeping. All of that is covered by Seraj in the US. And we respond to requests that are given to us from Estephan and Laurie, and send the money over, and they spend it. They decide how it's spent. So it really is a Palestinian driven program in Palestine. I remember in the early days, we really wanted a lot of input as to how to run a library. And we've realized eventually that it's really not our job, because you start with a village that has had no library. Checking out a book is really not, and you go there, you read the books, you leave them there, or individual libraries have different procedures, but it's set up by the village and by the volunteers that have run those libraries, and they have to ask for the library. I think that's the procedure. So they really want it, and they are willing to support it. I do think that the scholarship program that we also fund has given dedicated volunteers who spend time helping to run the libraries and open them up and welcome the children. So that's kind of a voluntary staff situation.
And just the last word, Siraj was running with partnership with the local organization. So the first 10 libraries, they were in partnership with the local organization, mostly women organizations or youth organizations, except for the last two, which is they will be launched next month. They will be directly run by Siraj because they're much bigger centers and they're kind of like a milestone for the work of Siraj.
Well, I want to give, especially given the timing that we are so appreciative of Laurie and Estephan being a part of this, and thank you for coming and sharing your labor and your hard work, and the love that you put into that, as well as Pauline and Galen and all of you who gave of a Saturday in May to be with us. May is a month that is just weddings and graduations and so many things, people on the road. So it's a tough time, and we recognize that. We wanted to close with a video that one of, our main contact at Mar Elias, Dr. Emil Haloun, who is a teacher there as well, sent us a video of, the way the story spreads, which is a ritual that the students did in memory of Shireen in the last day or two. And it's a 1-minute video. And so with appreciation and memory, as well as hopefully calls to act and finding more ways to intersect and to be, world citizens together. We pray for you. We hope many things for you, and especially we'll be watching for the news in June when you open these 2 news centers. So Esrea has the video, and I hope that your days are peaceful and your evenings are restful. So let's all just take a moment to watch this.
أموت أشهد أن لا
Go in peace, shalom, and salam.